And if man, owing to half wisdom, acts and lives and thinks of the universe as merely a dream, akin to his own finite dreams, then indeed does it so become for him, and like a sleep-walker he stumbles ever around and around in a circle, making no progress, and being forced into an awakening at last by his falling bruised and bleeding over the natural laws which he ignored. Keep your mind ever on the star, but let your eyes watch over your footsteps, lest you fall into the mire by reason of your upward gaze. Remember the divine paradox, that while the universe is not, still it is. Remember ever the two poles of truth, the absolute and the relative. Beware of half-truths. What Hermetists know as the law of paradox is an aspect of the principle of polarity. The Hermetic writings are filled with references to the appearance of the paradox in the consideration of the problems of life and being. The teachers are constantly warning their students against the error of omitting the other side of any question, and their warnings are particularly directed to the problems of the absolute and the relative, which perplex all students of philosophy, and which cause so many to think and act contrary to what is generally known as common sense. And we caution all students to be sure to grasp the divine paradox of the absolute and relative, lest they become entangled in the mire of the half-truth. With this in view, this particular lesson has been written. Read it carefully. The first thought that comes to the thinking man after he realizes the truth that the universe is a mental creation of the All, is that the universe and all that it contains is a mere illusion, an unreality, against which idea his instincts revolt. But this, like all other great truths, must be considered both from the absolute and the relative points of view. From the absolute viewpoint, of course, the universe is in the nature of an illusion, a dream, a phantasmagoria, as compared to the All in itself. We recognize this even in our ordinary view, for we speak of the world as a fleeting show, that comes and goes, is born and dies. For the element of impermanence and change, finiteness and unsubstantiality, must ever be connected with the idea of a created universe when it is contrasted with the idea of the All, no matter what may be our beliefs concerning the nature of both. Philosopher, metaphysician, scientist and theologian all agree upon this idea, and the thought is found in all forms of philosophical thought and religious conceptions, as well as in the theories of the respective schools of metaphysics and theology. So, the Hermetic teachings do not preach the unsubstantiality of the universe in any stronger terms than those more familiar to you, though their presentation of the subject may seem somewhat more startling. Anything that has a beginning and an ending must be, in a sense, unreal and untrue, and the universe comes under the rule, in all schools of thought. From the absolute point of view, there is nothing real except the All, no matter what terms we may use in thinking of or discussing the subject. Whether the universe be created of matter, or whether it be a mental creation in the minds of the All, it is unsubstantial, non-enduring, a thing of time, space and change. We want you to realize this fact thoroughly before you pass judgment on the Hermetic conception of the mental nature of the universe. Think over any and all of the other conceptions and see whether this be not true of them. But the absolute point of view shows merely one side of the picture. The other side is the relative one. Absolute truth has been defined as things as the mind of God knows them, while relative truth is things as the highest reason of man understands them. And so, while to the All the universe must be unreal and illusionary, a mere dream or result of meditation, nevertheless, to the finite minds forming a part of that universe, and viewing it through mortal faculties, the universe is very real indeed, and must be so considered. In recognizing the absolute view, we must not make the mistake of ignoring or denying the facts and phenomena of the universe, as they present themselves to our mortal faculties. We are not the All, remember. To take familiar illustrations, we all recognize the fact that matter exists to our senses. We will fare badly if we do not. And yet, even our finite minds understand the scientific dictum that there is no such thing as matter from a scientific point of view. That which we call matter is held to be merely an aggregation of atoms, which atoms themselves are merely a grouping of units of force, called electrons or ions, vibrating and in constant circular motion. We kick a stone and we feel the impact. It seems to be real, notwithstanding that we know it to be merely what we have stated above. But remember that our foot, which feels the impact by means of our brains, is likewise matter, so constituted of electrons, and for that matter, so are our brains. And, at the best, if it were not by reason of our mind, we would not know the foot or stone at all. Then again, the ideal of the artist or sculptor, which he is endeavouring to reproduce in stone or on canvas, seems very real to him. So do the characters in the mind of the author or dramatist, which he seeks to express so that others may recognize them. And if this be true in the case of our finite minds, what must be the degree of reality in the mental images created in the mind of the Infinite? Oh friends, to mortals this universe of mentality is very real indeed. It is the only one we can ever know, though we rise from plane to plane, higher and higher in it. To know it otherwise, by actual experience, we must be the All itself. It is true that the higher we rise in the scale, the nearer to the mind of the Father we reach, the more apparent becomes the illusory nature of finite things, but not until the All finally withdraws us into itself does the vision actually vanish. So we need not dwell upon the feature of illusion. Rather let us, recognizing the real nature of the universe, seek to understand its mental laws, and endeavour to use them to the best effect in our upward progress through life, as we travel from plane to plane of being. The laws of the universe are none less iron laws, because of the mental nature. All except the All are bound by them. What is in the infinite mind of the All is real, in a degree second only to that reality itself which is vested in the nature of the All. So do not feel insecure or afraid. We are all held firmly in the infinite mind of the All, and there is naught to hurt us or for us to fear. There is no power outside of the All to affect us, so we may rest calm and secure. There is a world of comfort and security in this realization when once attained. Then calm and peaceful do we sleep, rocked in the cradle of the deep, resting safely on the bosom of the ocean of infinite mind which is the All. In the All, indeed, do we live and move and have our being. Matter is none the less matter to us, while we dwell on the plane of matter, although we know it to be merely an aggregation of electrons or particles of force, vibrating rapidly and gyrating round each other in the formations of atoms. The atoms in turn vibrating and gyrating, forming molecules, which latter in turn form larger masses of matter. Nor does matter become less matter when we follow the inquiry still further, and learn from the Hermetic teachings that the force of which the electrons are but units is merely a manifestation of the mind of the All, and, like all else in the universe, is purely mental in its nature. While on the plane of matter we must recognize its phenomena. We may control matter, as all masters of higher or lesser degree do, but we do so by applying the higher forces. We commit a folly when we attempt to deny the existence of matter in the relative aspect. We may deny its mastery over us, and rightly so, but we should not attempt to ignore it in its relative aspect, at least so long as we dwell upon its plane. Nor do the laws of nature become less constant or effective when we know them, likewise, to be merely mental creations. They are in full effect on the various planes. We overcome the lower laws by applying still higher ones, and in this way only. But we cannot escape law or rise above it entirely. Nothing but the All can escape law, and that because the All is law itself, from which all laws emerge. The most advanced masters may acquire the powers usually attributed to the gods of men, and there are countless ranks of being, in the great hierarchy of life, whose being and power transcends even that of the highest masters among men to a degree unthinkable by mortals. But even the highest master and the highest being must bow to the law, and be as nothing in the eye of the All. So that if even these highest beings, whose powers exceed even those attributed by men to their gods, if even these are bound by and subservient to law, then imagine the presumption of mortal man, of our race and grade, when he dares to consider the laws of nature as unreal, visionary and illusory, because he happens to be able to grasp the truth that all laws are mental in nature, and simply mental creations of the All. Those laws which the All intends to be governing laws are not to be defied or argued away. So long as the universe endures, will they endure. For the universe exists merely by virtue of these laws which form its framework and which hold it together. The Hermetic principle of mentalism, while explaining the true nature of the universe, upon the principle that all is mental, does not change the scientific conceptions of the universe, life, or evolution. In fact, science merely corroborates the Hermetic teachings. The latter merely teaches that the nature of the universe is mental, while modern science has taught that it is material, or, of late, that it is energy at the last analysis. The Hermetic teachings have no fault to find with Herbert Spencer's basic principle, which postulates the existence of an infinite and eternal energy from which all things proceed. In fact, the Hermetics recognize in Spencer's philosophy the highest outside statement of the workings of the natural laws that have ever been promulgated, and they believe Spencer to have been a reincarnation of an ancient philosopher who dwelt in ancient Egypt thousands of years ago, and who later incarnated as Heraclitus, the Grecian philosopher who lived BC 500. And they regard his statement of the infinite and eternal energy as directly in the line of the Hermetic teachings, always with the addition of their own doctrine that his energy is the energy of the mind of the All. With the master key of the Hermetic philosophy, the student of Spencer will be able to unlock many doors of the inner philosophical conceptions of the great English philosopher, whose work shows the results of the preparation of his previous incarnations. His teachings regarding evolution and rhythm are in almost perfect agreement with the Hermetic teachings regarding the principle of rhythm. So the student of Hermetics need not lay aside any of his cherished scientific views regarding the universe. All he is asked to do is to grasp the underlying principle of the All is Mind, and the universe is mental held in the mind of the All. He will find that the other 6 of the 7 principles will fit into his scientific knowledge, and will serve to bring out obscure points and to throw light in dark corners. This is not to be wondered at, when we realize the influence of the Hermetic thought on the early philosophers of Greece, upon whose foundations of thought the theories of modern science largely rest. The acceptance of the first Hermetic principle, mentalism, is the only great point of difference between modern science and Hermetic students, and science is gradually moving toward the Hermetic position in its groping in the dark for a way out of the labyrinth into which it has wandered in its search for reality. The purpose of this lesson is to impress upon the minds of our students the fact that, to all intents and purposes, the universe and its laws and its phenomena are just as real, so far as man is concerned, as they would be under the hypotheses of materialism or energism. Under any hypothesis, the universe in its outer aspect is changing, ever-flowing and transitory, and therefore devoid of substantiality and reality. But, note the other pole of the truth, under any of the same hypotheses we are compelled to act and live as if the fleeting things were real and substantial. With this difference always between the various hypotheses, that under the old view mental power was ignored as a natural force, while under mentalism it becomes the greatest natural force. And this one difference revolutionizes life, to those who understand the principle and its resulting laws and practice. So, finally, students all, grasp the advantage of mentalism, and learn to know, use and apply the laws resulting therefrom. But do not yield to the temptation which, as the Kybalion states, overcomes the half-wise, and which causes them to be hypnotized by the apparent unreality of things, the consequence being that they wander about like dream people dwelling in a world of dreams, ignoring the practical work and life of man, the end being that they are broken against the rocks and torn asunder by the elements by reason of their folly. Rather follow the example of the wise, which the same authority states use law against laws, the higher against the lower, and by the art of alchemy transmute that which is undesirable into that which is worthy, and thus triumph. Following the authority, let us avoid the half-wisdom, which is folly, which ignores the truth that mastery consists not in abnormal dreams, visions, and fantastic imaginings or living, but in using the higher forces against the lower, escaping the pains of the lower planes by vibrating on the higher. Remember always, student, that transmutation, not presumptuous denial, is the weapon of the Master. The above quotations are from the Kybalion, and are worthy of being committed to memory by the student. We do not live in a world of dreams, but in an universe which, while relative, is real so far as our lives and actions are concerned. Our business in the universe is not to deny its existence, but to live using its laws to rise from lower to higher, living on, doing the best that we can under the circumstances arising each day, and living, so far as is possible, to our highest ideas and ideals. The true meaning of life is not known to men on this plane, if indeed to any, but the highest authorities and our own intuitions teach us that we will make no mistake in living up to the best that is in us, so far as is possible, and realizing the universal tendency in the same direction in spite of apparent evidences to the contrary. We are all on the path, and the road leads upward ever, with frequent resting places. Read the message of the Kybalion, and follow the example of the wise, avoiding the mistake of the half-wise, who perish by reason of their folly. End of Chapter 6 of the Kybalion, by 3 Initiates. Chapter 7 of the Kybalion, by 3 Initiates. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 7. The All in All. While all is in the All, it is equally true that the All is in all. To him who truly understands this truth hath come great knowledge. The Kybalion. How often have the majority of people heard repeated the statement that their deity, called by many names, was all in all, and how little have they suspected the inner occult truth concealed by these carelessly uttered words. The commonly used expression is a survival of the ancient Hermetic maxim quoted above. As the Kybalion says, to him who truly understands this truth hath come great knowledge. And this being so, let us seek this truth, the understanding of which means so much. In this statement of truth, this Hermetic maxim, is concealed one of the greatest philosophical, scientific, and religious truths. We have given you the Hermetic teaching regarding the mental nature of the universe, the truth that the universe is mental, held in the mind of the All. As the Kybalion says, in the passage quoted above, all is in the All. But note also the co-related statement, that it is equally true that the All is in all. This apparently contradictory statement is reconcilable under the law of paradox. It is, moreover, an exact Hermetic statement of the relations existing between the All and its mental universe. We have seen how all is in the All. Now let us examine the other aspect of the subject. The Hermetic teachings are to the effect that the All is immanent in, remaining within, inherent abiding within, its universe, and in every part, particle, unit, or combination within the universe. This statement is usually illustrated by the teachers by a reference to the principle of correspondence. The teacher instructs the student to form a mental image of something, a person, an idea, something having a mental form, the favourite example being that of the author or dramatist forming an idea of his characters, or a painter or sculptor forming an image of an ideal that he wishes to express by his art. In each case, the student will find that while the image has its existence and a being solely within his own mind, yet he, the student, author, dramatist, painter, or sculptor, is in a sense immanent in, remaining within or abiding within, the mental image also. In other words, the entire virtue, life, spirit, of reality in the mental image is derived from the immanent mind of the thinker. Consider this for a moment until the idea is grasped. To take a modern example, let us say that Othello, Iago, Hamlet, Lear, Richard III existed merely in the mind of Shakespeare at the time of their conception or creation, and yet Shakespeare also existed within each of these characters, giving them their vitality, spirit, and action. Whose is the spirit of the characters that we know as Micawber, Oliver Twist, Uriah Heep? Is it Dickens, or have each of these characters a personal spirit, independent of their creator? Have the Venus of Medici, the Sistine Madonna, the Apollo Belvedere, spirits and reality of their own, or do they represent the spiritual and mental power of their creators? The law of paradox explains that both propositions are true, viewed from the proper viewpoints. Micawber is both Micawber and yet Dickens. And again, while Micawber may be said to be Dickens, yet Dickens is not identical with Micawber. Man, like Micawber, may exclaim, "The spirit of my Creator is inherent within me, and yet I am not He." How different this from the shocking half-truth so vociferously announced by certain of the half-wise, who fill the air with their raucous cries of "I am God." Imagine poor Micawber, or the sneaky Uriah Heep, crying, "I am Dickens," or some of the lowly clods in one of Shakespeare's plays grandiloquently announcing that "I am Shakespeare." The All is in the earthworm, and yet the earthworm is far from being the All. And still the wonder remains, that though the earthworm exists merely as a lowly thing, created and having its being solely within the mind of the All, yet the All is immanent in the earthworm, and in the particles that go to make up the earthworm. Can there be any greater mystery than this of All in the All, and the All in All? The student will, of course, realize that the illustrations given above are necessarily imperfect and inadequate, for they represent the creation of mental images in finite minds, while the universe is a creation of infinite mind, and the difference between the two poles separates them. And yet it is merely a matter of degree. The same principle is in operation. The principle of correspondence manifests in each. As above, so below; as below, so above. And in the degree that man realizes the existence of the indwelling spirit immanent within his being, so will he rise in the spiritual scale of life. This is what spiritual development means: the recognition, realization, and manifestation of the spirit within us. Try to remember this last definition, that of spiritual development. It contains the truth of true religion. There are many planes of being, many sub-planes of life, many degrees of existence in the universe, and all depend upon the advancement of beings in the scale, of which scale the lowest point is the grossest matter, the highest being separated only by the thinnest division from the spirit of the All. And upward and onward along this scale of life everything is moving. All are on the path, whose end is the All. All progress is returning home. All is upward and onward, in spite of all seemingly contradictory appearances. Such is the message of the illumined. The Hermetic teachings concerning the process of the mental creation of the universe are that at the beginning of the creative cycle the All, in its aspect of being, projects its will toward its aspect of becoming, and the process of creation begins. It is taught that the process consists of the lowering of vibration until a very low degree of vibratory energy is reached, at which point the grossest possible form of matter is manifested. This process is called the stage of involution, in which the All becomes involved, or wrapped up in its creation. This process is believed by the Hermetists to have a correspondence to the mental process of an artist, writer, or inventor, who becomes so wrapped up in his mental creation as to almost forget his own existence, and who, for the time being, almost lives in his creation. Instead of being wrapped, we use the word rapt. Perhaps we will give a better idea of what is meant. This involuntary stage of creation is sometimes called the outpouring of the divine energy, just as the evolutionary state is called the indrawing. The extreme pole of the creative process is considered to be the furthest removed from the All, while the beginning of the evolutionary stage is regarded as the beginning of the return swing of the pendulum of rhythm, a coming home idea, being held in all of the Hermetic teachings. The teachings are that during the outpouring the vibrations become lower and lower until finally the urge ceases and the return swing begins. But there is this difference, that while in the outpouring the creative forces manifest compactly and as a whole, yet from the beginning of the evolutionary or indrawing stage there is manifested the law of individualization, that is, the tendency to separate into units of force, so that finally that which left the All as unindividualized energy returns to its source as countless highly developed units of life, having risen higher and higher in the scale by means of physical, mental and spiritual evolution. The ancient Hermetists used the word meditation in describing the process of the mental creation of the universe in the mind of the All, the word contemplation also being frequently employed, but the idea intended seems to be that of the employment of the divine attention. Attention is a word derived from the Latin root, meaning to reach out, to stretch out, and so the active attention is really a mental reaching out, extension of mental energy, so that the underlying idea is readily understood when we examine into the real meaning of attention. The Hermetic teachings regarding the process of evolution are that the All, having meditated upon the beginning of the creation, having thus established the material foundations of the universe, having thought it into existence, then gradually awakens or rouses from its meditation, and in so doing starts into manifestation the process of evolution, on the material, mental and spiritual planes, successively and in order. Thus the upward movement begins, and all begins to move spiritward. Matter becomes less gross, the units spring into being, the combinations begin to form, life appears and manifests in higher and higher forms, and mind becomes more and more in evidence, the vibrations constantly becoming higher. In short, the entire process of evolution, in all of its phases, begins, and proceeds according to the established laws of the indrawing process. All of this occupies eons upon eons of man's time, each eon containing countless millions of years, but yet the illumined inform us that the entire creation, including involution and evolution of an universe, is but as the twinkle of the eye to the All. At the end of countless cycles of eons of time, the All withdraws its attention, its contemplation and meditation of the universe, for the great work is finished, and all is withdrawn into the All from which it emerged. But mystery of mysteries, the spirit of each soul is not annihilated, but is infinitely expanded, the created and the creator emerged. Such is the report of the illumined. The above illustration of the meditation and subsequent awakening from meditation of the All is of course but an attempt of the teachers to describe the infinite process by a finite example. And yet, as below, so above. The difference is merely in degree. And just as the All arouses itself from the meditation upon the universe, so does man, in time, cease from manifesting upon the material plane, and withdraws himself more and more into the indwelling spirit, which is indeed the divine Ego. There is one more matter of which we desire to speak in this lesson, and that comes very near to an invasion of the metaphysical field of speculation, although our purpose is merely to show the futility of such speculation. We allude to the question which inevitably comes to the mind of all thinkers who have ventured to seek the truth. The question is, why does the All create universes? The question may be asked in different forms, but the above is the gist of the inquiry. Men have striven hard to answer this question, but there is still no answer worthy of the name. Some have imagined that the All had something to gain by it, but this is absurd, for what could the All gain that it did not already possess? Others have sought the answer in the idea that the All wished something to love, and others that it created for pleasure, or amusement, or because it was lonely, or to manifest its power. All puerile explanations and ideas belonging to the childish period of thought. Others have sought to explain the mystery by assuming that the All found itself compelled to create by reason of its own internal nature, its creative instinct. This idea is an advance of the others, but its weak point lies in the idea of the All being compelled by anything, internal or external. If its internal nature, or creative instinct, compelled it to do anything, then the internal nature or creative instinct would be the Absolute, instead of the All, and so accordingly that part of the proposition falls. And yet the All does create and manifest, and seems to find some kind of satisfaction in so doing. And it is difficult to escape the conclusion that in some infinite degree it must have what would correspond to an inner nature or creative instinct in man, with correspondingly infinite desire and will. It could not act unless it willed to act, and it would not will to act unless it desired to act, and it would not desire to act unless it obtained some satisfaction thereby. And all of these things would belong to an inner nature, and might be postulated as existing according to the law of correspondence. But still we prefer to think of the All as acting entirely free from any influence, internal as well as external. That is the problem which lies at the root of difficulty, and the difficulty that lies at the root of the problem. Strictly speaking, there cannot be said to be any reason whatsoever for the All to act, for a reason implies a cause, and the All is above cause and effect, except when it wills to become a cause, at which time the principle is set into motion. So, you see, the matter is unthinkable, just as the All is unknowable. Just as we say the All merely is, so we are compelled to say that the All acts because it acts. At the last, the All is all reason in itself, all law in itself, all action in itself, and it may be said truthfully that the All is its own reason, its own law, its own act, or still further, that the All, its reason, its act, is law, are one, all being names for the same thing. In the opinion of those who are giving you these present lessons, the answer is locked up in the inner self of the All, along with its secret of being. The law of correspondence, in our opinion, reaches only to that aspect of the All which may be spoken of as the aspect of becoming. Back of that aspect is the aspect of being, in which all laws are lost in law. All principles merge into principle and the All. Principle and being are identical, one and the same. Therefore, metaphysical speculation on this point is futile. We go into the matter here merely to show that we recognize the question, and also the absurdity of the ordinary answers of metaphysics and theology. In conclusion, it may be of interest to our students to learn that while some of the ancient and modern Hermetic teachers have rather inclined in the direction of applying the principle of correspondence to the question, with the result of the inner nature conclusion, still the legends have it that Hermes, the Great, when asked this question by his advanced students, answered them by pressing his lips tightly together and saying not a word, indicating that there was no answer. But then he may have intended to apply the axiom of his philosophy, that the lips of wisdom are closed, except to the ears of understanding, believing that even his advanced students did not possess the understanding which entitled them to the teaching. At any rate, if Hermes possessed the secret, he failed to impart it, and so far as the world is concerned, the lips of Hermes are closed regarding it. And where the great Hermes hesitated to speak, what mortal may dare to teach? But remember that whatever be the answer to this problem, if indeed there be an answer, the truth remains that, while the All is in the All, it is equally true that the All is in all. The teaching on this point is emphatic, and we may add the concluding words of the quotation: "To him who truly understands this truth hath come great knowledge." End of chapter 7 of the Kybalion, by 3 Initiates. Chapter 8 of the Kybalion, by 3 Initiates. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 8. The Planes of Correspondence. As above, so below; as below, so above. The Kybalion. The great second Hermetic Principle embodies the truth that there is a harmony, agreement, and correspondence between the several planes of manifestation, life, and being. This truth is a truth because all that is included in the universe emanates from the same source, and the same laws, principles, and characteristics apply to each unit, or combination of units of activity, as each manifests its own phenomena upon its own plane. For the purpose of convenience of thought and study, the Hermetic philosophy considers that the universe may be divided into three great classes of phenomena, known as the three great planes, namely, 1. The great physical plane; 2. The great mental plane; 3. The great spiritual plane. These divisions are more or less artificial and arbitrary, for the truth is that all of the three divisions are but ascending degrees of the great scale of life, the lowest point of which is undifferentiated matter, and the highest point that of spirit; and, moreover, the different planes shade into each other, so that no hard and fast division may be made between the higher phenomena of the physical and the lower of the mental, or between the higher of the mental and the lower of the physical. In short, the three great planes may be regarded as three great groups of degrees of life manifestation. While the purposes of this little book do not allow us to enter into an extended discussion of, or explanation of, the subject of these different planes, still we think it well to give a general description of the same at this point. At the beginning we may as well consider the question so often asked by the neophyte, who desires to be informed regarding the meaning of the word "plane," which term has been very freely used, and very poorly explained, in many recent works upon the subject of occultism. The question is generally about as follows: Is a plane a place having dimensions, or is it merely a condition or state? We answer, no, not a place, nor ordinary dimension of space, and yet more than a state or condition. It may be considered as a state or condition, and yet the state or condition is a degree of dimension, in a scale subject to measurement. Somewhat paradoxical, is it not? But let us examine the matter. A dimension, you know, is a measure in a straight line relating to measure, etc. The ordinary dimensions of space are length, breadth, and height, or perhaps length, breadth, and height, thickness or circumference. But there is another dimension of created things, or measure in a straight line, known to occultists, and to scientists as well, although the latter have not as yet applied the term dimension to it, and this new dimension, which, by the way, is the much speculated about fourth dimension, is the standard used in determining the degrees or planes. This fourth dimension may be called the dimension of vibration. It is a fact well known to modern science, as well as to the Hermetists, who have embodied the truth in their third Hermetic Principle, that everything is in motion, everything vibrates, nothing is at rest. From the highest manifestation to the lowest, everything and all things vibrate. Not only do they vibrate at different rates of motion, but as in different directions and in a different manner. The degrees of the rate of vibrations constitute the degrees of measurement on the scale of vibrations. In other words, the degrees of the fourth dimension, and these degrees form what occultists call planes. The higher the degree of rate of vibration, the higher the plane, and the higher the manifestation of life occupying that plane. So that while a plane is not a place, nor yet a state or condition, yet it possesses qualities common to both. We shall have more to say regarding the subject of the scale of vibrations in our next lessons, in which we shall consider the Hermetic Principle of vibration. You will kindly remember, however, that the three great planes are not actual divisions of the phenomena of the universe, but merely arbitrary terms used by the Hermetists in order to aid in the thought and study of the various degrees and forms of universal activity and life. The atom of matter, the unit of force, the mind of man, and the being of the archangel are all but degrees in one scale, and all fundamentally the same, the difference between them solely a matter of degree and rate of vibration. All are creations of the All, and have their existence solely within the infinite mind of the All. The Hermetists subdivide each of the three great planes into 7 minor planes, and each of these latter are also subdivided into 7 sub-planes, all divisions being more or less arbitrary, shading into each other, and adopted merely for convenience of scientific study and thought. The great physical plane, and its 7 minor planes, is that division of the phenomena of the universe which includes all that relates to physics, or material things, forces and manifestations. It includes all forms of that which we call matter, and all forms of that which we call energy or force. But you must remember that the Hermetic philosophy does not recognize matter as a thing in itself, or as having a separate existence even in the mind of the All. The teachings are that matter is but a form of energy, that is, energy at a low rate of vibrations of a certain kind. And accordingly the Hermetists classify matter under the head of energy, and give to it 3 of the 7 minor planes of the great physical plane. These 7 minor physical planes are as follows: 1. The plane of matter, A. 2. The plane of matter, B. 3. The plane of matter, C. 4. The plane of ethereal substance. 5. The plane of energy, A. 6. The plane of energy, B. 7. The plane of energy, C. The plane of matter, A, comprises forms of matter in its forms of solids, liquids and gases, as generally recognized by the textbooks on physics. The plane of matter, B, comprises certain higher and more subtle forms of matter of the existence of which modern science is but now recognizing, the phenomena of radiant matter, in its phases of radium, etc., belonging to the lower subdivision of this minor plane. The plane of matter, C, comprises forms of the most subtle and tenuous matter, the existence of which is not suspected by ordinary scientists. The plane of ethereal substance comprises that which science speaks of as the ether, a substance of extreme tenuity and elasticity, pervading all universal space, and acting as a medium for the transmission of waves of energy, such as light, heat, electricity, etc. This ethereal substance forms a connecting link between matter, so called, and energy, and partakes of the nature of each. The Hermetic teachings, however, instruct that this plane has 7 subdivisions, as have all of the minor planes, and that in fact there are 7 ethers, instead of but 1. Next above the plane of ethereal substance comes the plane of energy, A, which comprises the ordinary forms of energy known to science, its 7 subplanes being, respectively, heat, light, magnetism, electricity and attraction, including gravitation, cohesion, chemical affinity, etc., and several other forms of energy indicated by scientific experiments but not as yet named or classified. The plane of energy, B, comprises 7 subplanes of higher forms of energy not as yet discovered by science, but which have been called nature's finer forces, and which are called into operation in manifestations of certain forms of mental phenomena, and by which such phenomena becomes possible. The plane of energy, C, comprises 7 subplanes of energy, so highly organized that it bears many of the characteristics of life, but which is not recognized by the minds of men on the ordinary plane of development, being available for the use on beings of the spiritual plane alone. Such energy is unthinkable to ordinary man, and may be considered almost as the divine power. The beings employing the same are as gods, compared even to the highest human types known to us. The great mental plane comprises those forms of living things known to us in ordinary life, as well as certain other forms not so well known except to the occultist. The classification of the 7 minor mental planes is more or less satisfactory and arbitrary, unless accompanied by elaborate explanations which are foreign to the purpose of this particular work, but we may as well mention them. They are as follows: 1. The plane of mineral mind. 2. The plane of elemental mind, A. 3. The plane of plant mind. 4. The plane of elemental mind, B. 5. The plane of animal mind. 6. The plane of elemental mind, C. 7. The plane of human mind. The plane of mineral mind comprises the states or conditions of the units or entities, or groups and combinations of the same, which animate the forms known to us as minerals, chemicals, etc. These entities must not be confounded with the molecules, atoms and corpuscles themselves, the latter being merely the material bodies or forms of these entities, just as a man's body is but his material form, and not himself. These entities may be called souls in one sense, and are living beings of a low degree of development, life and mind, just a little more than the units of living energy which comprise the higher subdivisions of the highest physical plane. The average mind does not generally attribute the possession of mind, soul or life to the mineral kingdom, but all occultists recognize the existence of the same, and modern science is rapidly moving forward to the point of view of the Hermetic in this respect. The molecules, atoms and corpuscles have their loves and hates, likes and dislikes, attractions and repulsions, affinities and non-affinities, etc., and some of the more daring of modern scientific minds have expressed the opinion that the desire and will, emotions and feelings, of the atoms differ only in degree from those of men. We have no time or space to argue this matter here. All occultists know it to be a fact, and others are referred to some of the more recent scientific works for outside corroboration. There are the usual 7 subdivisions to this plane. The plane of elemental mind A comprises the state or condition and degree of mental and vital development of a class of entities unknown to the average man, but recognized to occultists. They are invisible to the ordinary senses of man, but nevertheless exist and play their part of the drama of the universe. Their degree of intelligence is between that of the mineral and chemical entities on the one hand, and of the divisions of the plant kingdom on the other. There are 7 subdivisions to this plane also. The plane of plant mind, in its 7 subdivisions, comprises the states or conditions of the entities comprising the kingdoms of the plant world, the vital and mental phenomena of which is fairly understood by the average intelligent person, many new and interesting scientific works regarding mind and life in plants having been published during the last decade. Plants have life, mind and souls, as well as have the animals, man and Superman. The plane of elemental mind B, in its 7 subdivisions, comprises the states and conditions of a higher form of elemental or unseen entities, playing their part in the general work of the universe, the mind and life of which form a part of the scale between the plane of plant mind and the plane of animal mind, the entities partaking of the nature of both. The plane of animal mind, in its 7 subdivisions, comprises the states and conditions of the entities, beings, or souls, animating the animal forms of life, familiar to us all. It is not necessary to go into details regarding this kingdom or plane of life, for the animal world is as familiar to us as is our own. The plane of elemental mind C, in its 7 subdivisions, comprises those entities or beings, invisible as are all such elemental forms, which partake of the nature of both animal and human life in a degree and in certain combinations. The highest forms are semi-human in intelligence. The plane of human mind, in its 7 subdivisions, comprises those manifestations of life and mentality which are common to man, in his various grades, degrees and divisions. In this connection, we wish to point out the fact that the average man of today occupies but the 4th subdivision of the plane of human mind, and only the most intelligent have crossed the borders of the 5th subdivision. It has taken the race millions of years to reach this stage, and it will take many more years for the race to move on to the 6th and 7th subdivisions, and beyond. But remember that there have been races before us which have passed through these degrees, and then on to higher planes. Our own race is the 5th, with stragglers from the 4th, which has set foot upon the path. And then, there are a few advanced souls of our own race who have outstripped the masses, and who have passed on to the 6th and 7th subdivision, and some few beings still further on. The man of the 6th subdivision will be the Superman, he of the 7th will be the Overman. In our consideration of the 7 minor mental planes, we have merely referred to the 3 elementary planes in a general way. We do not wish to go into this subject in detail in this work, for it does not belong to this part of the general philosophy and teachings. But we may say this much, in order to give you a little clearer idea of the relations of these planes to the more familiar ones. The elementary planes bear the same relation to the planes of mineral, plant, animal, and human mentality and life that the black keys on the piano do to the white keys. The white keys are sufficient to produce music, but there are certain scales, melodies, and harmonies in which the black keys play their part, and in which their presence is necessary. They are also necessary as connecting links of soul condition, entity states, etc., between the several other planes, certain forms of development being attained therein. This last fact giving to the reader, who can read between the lines, a new light upon the processes of evolution, and a new key to the secret door of the leaps of life between kingdom and kingdom. The great kingdoms of elementals are fully recognized by all occultists, and the esoteric writings are full of mention of them. The readers of Bulwer's Zanoni and similar tales will recognize the entities inhabiting these planes of life. Passing on from the great mental plane to the great spiritual plane, what shall we say? How can we explain these higher states of being, life, and mind, to minds as yet unable to grasp and understand the higher subdivisions of the plane of human mind? The task is impossible. We can speak only in the most general terms. How may light be described to a man born blind? How sugar to a man who has never tasted anything sweet? How harmony to one born deaf? All that we can say is that the 7 minor planes of the great spiritual plane, each minor plane having its 7 subdivisions, comprise beings possessing life, mind, and form as far above that of man of today as the latter is above the earthworm, mineral, or even certain forms of energy or matter. The life of these beings so far transcends ours that we cannot even think of the details of the same. Their minds so far transcend ours that to them we scarcely seem to think, and our mental processes seem almost akin to material processes. The matter of which their forms are composed is of the highest planes of matter, nay, some are even said to be clothed in pure energy. What may be said of such beings? On the 7 minor planes of the great spiritual plane exist beings of whom we may speak as angels, archangels, demigods. On the lower minor planes dwell those great souls whom we call masters and adepts. Above them come the great hierarchies of the angelic posts, unthinkable to man, and above those come those who may without irreverence be called the gods. So high in the scale of being are they, their being, intelligence, and power being akin to those attributed by the races of men to their conceptions of deity. These beings are beyond even the highest flights of the human imagination, the word divine being the only one applicable to them. Many of these beings, as well as the angelic host, take the greatest interest in the affairs of the universe and play an important part in its affairs. These unseen divinities and angelic helpers extend their influence freely and powerfully in the process of evolution and cosmic progress. Their occasional intervention and assistance in human affairs have led to the many legends, beliefs, religions, and traditions of the race, past and present. They have superimposed their knowledge and power upon the world, again and again, all under the law of the All, of course. But yet, even the highest of these advanced beings exist merely as creations of, and in the mind of the All, and are subject to the cosmic processes and universal laws. They are still mortal. We may call them gods if we like, but still they are but the elder brethren of the race, the advanced souls who have outstripped their brethren, and who have foregone the ecstasy of absorption by the All, in order to help the race on its upward journey along the path. But they belong to the universe, and are subject to its conditions. They are mortal, and their plane is below that of absolute spirit. Only the most advanced Hermetists are able to grasp the inner teachings regarding the state of existence and the powers manifested on the spiritual planes. The phenomena is so much higher than that of the mental planes that a confusion of ideas would surely result from an attempt to describe the same. Only those whose minds have been carefully trained along the lines of the Hermetic philosophy for years, yes, those who have brought with them from other incarnations the knowledge acquired previously, can comprehend just what is meant by the teaching regarding these spiritual planes. And much of these inner teachings is held by the Hermetists as being too sacred, important, and even dangerous for general public dissemination. The intelligent student may recognize what we mean by this when we state that the meaning of spirit, as used by the Hermetists, is akin to living power, animated force, inner essence, essence of life, etc., which meaning must not be confounded with that usually and commonly employed in connection with the term, that is, religious, ecclesiastical, spirituel, ethereal, holy, etc., etc. To occultists the word spirit is used in the sense of the animating principle, carrying with it the idea of power, living energy, mystic force, etc. And occultists know that that which is known to them as spiritual power may be employed for evil as well as good ends, in accordance with the principle of polarity, a fact which has been recognized by the majority of religions in their conceptions of Satan, Beelzebub, the Devil, Lucifer, fallen angels, etc. And so the knowledge regarding these planes has been kept in the Holy of Holies in all esoteric fraternities and occult orders, in the secret chamber of the temple. But this may be said here, that those who have attained high spiritual powers and have misused them, have a terrible fate in store for them, and the swing of the pendulum of rhythm will inevitably swing them back to the furthest extreme of material existence, from which point they must retrace their steps spiritward, along the weary rounds of the path, but always with the added torture of having always with them a lingering memory of the heights from which they fell owing to their evil actions. The legends of the fallen angels have a basis in actual facts, as all advanced occultists know. The striving for selfish power on the spiritual planes inevitably results in the selfish soul losing its spiritual balance and falling back as far as it had previously risen. But to even such a soul the opportunity of a return is given, and such souls make the return journey, paying the terrible penalty according to the invariable law. In conclusion, we would again remind you that according to the principle of correspondence, which embodies the truth, as above, so below, as below, so above, all of the 7 Hermetic principles are in full operation on all of the many planes, physical, mental, and spiritual. The principle of mental substance, of course, applies to all the planes, for all are held in the mind of the All. The principle of correspondence manifests in all, for there is a correspondence, harmony, and agreement between the several planes. The principle of vibration manifests on all planes. In fact, the very differences that go to make the planes arise from vibration, as we have explained. The principle of polarity manifests on each plane, the extremes of the poles being apparently opposite and contradictory. The principle of rhythm manifests on each plane, the movement of the phenomena having its ebb and flow, rise and fall, incoming and outgoing. The principle of cause and effect manifests on each plane, every effect having its cause, and every cause having its effect. The principle of gender manifests on each plane, the creative energy being always manifest and operating along the lines of its masculine and feminine aspects. As above, so below. As below, so above. This centuries-old Hermetic axiom embodies one of the great principles of universal phenomena. As we proceed with our consideration of the remaining principles, we will see even more clearly the truth of the universal nature of this great principle of correspondence. End of Chapter 8 of the Kybalion, by 3 Initiates. Chapter 9 of the Kybalion, by 3 Initiates. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 9. Vibration. Nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. The Kybalion. The great third Hermetic principle, the principle of vibration, embodies the truth that motion is manifest in everything in the universe, that nothing is at rest, that everything moves, vibrates, and circles. This Hermetic principle was recognized by some of the early Greek philosophers, who embodied it in their systems, but then for centuries it was lost sight of by the thinkers outside of the Hermetic ranks. But in the 19th century physical science rediscovered the truth, and the 20th century scientific discoveries have added additional proof of the correctness and truth of this centuries-old Hermetic doctrine. The Hermetic teachings are that not only is everything in constant movement and vibration, but that the differences between the various manifestations of the universal power are due entirely to the varying rate and mode of vibrations. Not only this, but that even the All, in itself, manifests a constant vibration of such an infinite degree of intensity and rapid motion that it may be practically considered as at rest, the teachers directing the attention of the students to the fact that even on the physical plane a rapidly moving object, such as a revolving wheel, seems to be at rest. The teachings are to the effect that spirit is at one end of the pole of vibration, the other pole being certain extremely gross forms of matter. Between these two poles are millions upon millions of different rates and modes of vibration. Modern science has proven that all that we call matter and energy are but modes of vibratory motion, and some of the more advanced scientists are rapidly moving towards the positions of the occultists who hold that the phenomena of mind are likewise modes of vibration or motion. Let us see what science has to say regarding the question of vibrations in matter and energy. In the first place, science teaches that all matter manifests, in some degree, the vibrations arising from temperature or heat. Be an object cold or hot, both being but degrees of the same things, it manifests certain heat vibrations, and in that sense is in motion and vibration. Then all particles of matter are in circular movement, from corpuscle to suns. The planets revolve around suns, and many of them turn on their axes. The suns move around greater central points, and these are believed to move around still greater, and so on ad infinitum. The molecules of which the particular kinds of matter are composed are in a state of constant vibration and movement around each other and against each other. The molecules are composed of atoms, which, likewise, are in a state of constant movement and vibration. The atoms are composed of corpuscles, sometimes called electrons, ions, etc., which also are in a state of rapid motion, revolving around each other, and which manifest a very rapid state and mode of vibration. And so we see that all forms of matter manifest vibration, in accordance with the Hermetic principle of vibration. And so it is with the various forms of energy. Science teaches that light, heat, magnetism, and electricity are but forms of vibratory motion connected in some way with, and probably emanating from, the ether. Science does not as yet attempt to explain the nature of the phenomena known as cohesion, which is the principle of molecular attraction, nor chemical affinity, which is the principle of atomic attraction, nor gravitation, the greatest mystery of the three, which is the principle of attraction by which every particle or mass of matter is bound to every other particle or mass. These three forms of energy are not as yet understood by science. Yet the writers incline to the opinion that these two are manifestations of some form of vibratory energy, a fact which the Hermetists have held and taught for ages past. The universal ether, which is postulated by science without its nature being understood clearly, is held by the Hermetists to be but a higher manifestation of that which is erroneously called matter, that is to say, matter at a higher degree of vibration, and is called by them the ethereal substance. The Hermetists teach that this ethereal substance is of extreme tenuity and elasticity, and pervades universal space, serving as a medium of transmission of waves of vibratory energy, such as heat, light, electricity, magnetism, etc. The teachings are that the ethereal substance is a connecting link between the forms of vibratory energy known as matter, on the one hand, and energy or force on the other, and also that it manifests a degree of vibration in rate and mode entirely its own. Scientists have offered the illustration of a rapidly moving wheel, top or cylinder, to show the effects of increasing rates of vibration. The illustration supposes a wheel, top, or revolving cylinder running at a low rate of speed. We will call this revolving thing the object in following out the illustration. Let us suppose the object moving slowly. It may be seen readily, but no sound of its movement reaches the ear. The speed is gradually increased. In a few moments its movement becomes so rapid that a deep growl or low note may be heard. Then, as the rate is increased, the note rises one in the musical scale. Then, the motion being still further increased, the next highest note is distinguished. Then, one after another, all the notes of the musical scale appear, rising higher and higher as the motion is increased. Finally, when the motions have reached a certain rate, the final note perceptible to human ears is reached, and the shrill, piercing shriek dies away, and silence follows. No sound is heard from the revolving object, the rate of motion being so high that the human ear cannot register the vibrations. Then comes the perception of rising degrees of heat. Then, after quite a time, the eye catches a glimpse of the object becoming a dull reddish colour. As the rate increases, the red becomes brighter. Then, as the speed is increased, the red melts into an orange. Then the orange melts into a yellow. Then follow successively the shades of green, blue, indigo, and finally violet, as the rate of speed increases. Then, as the violet shades away and all colour disappears, the human eye not being able to register them. But there are invisible rays emanating from the revolving object, the rays that are used in photographing and other subtle rays of light. Then begin to manifest the peculiar rays known as X-rays, etc., as the constitution of the object changes. Electricity and magnetism are emitted when the appropriate rate of vibration is attained. When the object reaches a certain rate of vibration, its molecules disintegrate and resolve themselves into the original elements or atoms. Then the atoms, following the principle of vibration, are separated into the countless corpuscles of which they are composed. And finally, even the corpuscles disappear, and the object may be said to be composed of the ethereal substance. Science does not dare to follow the illustration further, but the Hermetists teach that if the vibrations be continually increased, the object would mount up the successive states of manifestation, and would in turn manifest the various mental stages, and then on spiritward, until it would finally re-enter the All, which is Absolute Spirit. The object, however, would have ceased to be an object long before the state of ethereal substance was reached, but otherwise the illustration is correct, inasmuch as it shows the effect of constantly increased rates and modes of vibration. It must be remembered in the above illustration that at the stages at which the object throws off vibrations of light, heat, etc., it is not actually resolved into those forms of energy, which are much higher in the scale, but simply that it reaches a degree of vibration in which those forms of energy are liberated, in a degree, from the confining influences of its molecules, atoms and corpuscles, as the case may be. These forms of energy, although much higher in the scale than matter, are imprisoned and confined in the material combinations, by reason of the energies manifesting through and using material forms, but thus becoming entangled and confined in their creations of material forms, which, to an extent, is true of all creations, the creating force becoming involved in its creation. But the Hermetic teachings go much further than do those of modern science. They teach that all manifestation of thought, emotion, reason, will or desire, or any mental state or condition, are accompanied by vibrations, a portion of which are thrown off, and which tend to affect the minds of other persons by induction. This is the principle which produces the phenomena of telepathy, mental influence, and other forms of the action and power of mind over mind, with which the general public is rapidly becoming acquainted, owing to the wide dissemination of occult knowledge by the various schools, cults and teachers along these lines at this time. Every thought, emotion, or mental state has its corresponding rate and mode of vibration, and by an effort of the will of the person, or of other persons, these mental states may be reproduced, just as a musical tone may be reproduced by causing an instrument to vibrate at a certain rate, just as colour may be reproduced in the same way. By a knowledge of the principle of vibration, as applied to mental phenomena, one may polarize his mind at any degree he wishes, thus gaining a perfect control over his mental states, moods, etc. In the same way he may affect the minds of others, producing the desired mental states in them. In short, he may be able to produce on the mental plane that which science produces on the physical plane, namely, vibrations at will. This power, of course, may be acquired only by the proper instruction, exercises, practice, etc., the science being that of mental transmutation, one of the branches of the Hermetic art. A little reflection on what we have said will show the student that the principle of vibration underlies the wonderful phenomena of the power manifested by the Masters and Adepts, who are able to apparently set aside the laws of nature, but who in reality are simply using one law against another, one principle against others, and who accomplish their results by changing the vibrations of material objects or forms of energy, and thus perform what are commonly called miracles. As one of the old Hermetic writers has truly said, he who understands the principle of vibration has grasped the sceptre of power. End of chapter 9 of the Kybalion, by 3 Initiates. Chapter 10 of the Kybalion, by 3 Initiates. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 10. Polarity. Everything is dual, everything has poles, everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled. The Kybalion. The great fourth Hermetic principle, the principle of polarity, embodies the truth that all manifested things have two sides, two aspects, two poles, a pair of opposites, with manifold degrees between the two extremes. The old paradoxes, which have ever perplexed the mind of men, are explained by an understanding of this principle. Man has always recognized something akin to this principle, and has endeavored to express it by such sayings, maxims, and aphorisms as the following: everything is and isn't at the same time. All truths are but half-truths. Every truth is half false. There are two sides to everything. There is a reverse side to every shield, etc., etc. The Hermetic teachings are to the effect that the difference between things seemingly diametrically opposed to each other is merely a matter of degree. It teaches that the pairs of opposites may be reconciled, and that thesis and antithesis are identical in nature but different in degree, and that the universal reconciliation of opposites is effected by a recognition of this principle of polarity. The teachers claim that illustrations of this principle may be had on every hand, and from an examination into the real nature of anything. They begin by showing that spirit and matter are but the two poles of the same thing, the intermediate planes being merely degrees of vibration. They show that the all and the many are the same, the difference being merely a matter of degree of mental manifestation. Thus the law and laws are the two opposite poles of the one thing. Likewise principle and principles, infinite mind and finite minds. Then passing on to the physical plane, they illustrate the principle by showing that heat and cold are identical in nature, the differences being merely a matter of degrees. The thermometer shows many degrees of temperature, the lowest pole being called cold, and the highest heat. Between these two poles are many degrees of heat or cold. Call them either, and you are equally correct. The higher of the two degrees is always warmer, while the lower is always colder. There is no absolute standard. All is a matter of degree. There is no place on the thermometer where heat ceases and cold begins. It is all a matter of higher or lower vibrations. The very terms high and low, which we are compelled to use, are but poles of the same thing. The terms are relative. So with east and west. Travel around the world in an eastward direction, and you reach a point which is called west at your starting point, and you return from that westward point. Travel far enough north, and you will find yourself travelling south, or vice versa. Light and darkness are poles of the same thing, with many degrees between them. The musical scale is the same. Starting with C, you move upward until you reach another C, and so on, the differences between the two ends of the board being the same, with many degrees between the two extremes. The scale of colour is the same, higher and lower vibrations being the only difference between high violet and low red. Large and small are relative. So are noise and quiet. Hard and soft follow the rule. Likewise sharp and dull. Positive and negative are two poles of the same thing, with countless degrees between them. Good and bad are not absolute. We call one end of the scale good and the other bad, or one end good and the other evil, according to the use of the terms. A thing is less good than the thing higher in the scale, but that less good thing in turn is more good than the thing below it, and so on, the more or less being regulated by the position on the scale. And so it is on the mental plane. Love and hate are generally regarded as being things diametrically opposed to each other, entirely different, unreconcilable. But we apply the principle of polarity. We find there is no such thing as absolute love or absolute hate, as distinguished from each other. The two are merely terms applied to the two poles of the same thing. Beginning at any point of the scale, we find more love or less hate as we ascend the scale, and more hate or less love as we descend. This being true no matter from what point, high or low, we may start. There are degrees of love and hate, and there is a middle point where like and dislike become so faint that it is difficult to distinguish between them. Courage and fear come under the same rule. The pairs of opposites exist everywhere. Where you find one thing, you find its opposite, the two poles. And it is this fact that enables the Hermetist to transmute one mental state into another, along the lines of polarization. Things belonging to different classes cannot be transmuted into each other, but things of the same class may be changed, that is, may have their polarity changed. Thus love never becomes east or west, or red or violet, but it may and often does turn into hate, and likewise hate may be transformed into love by changing its polarity. Courage may be transmuted into fear, and the reverse. Hard things may be rendered soft, dull things become sharp, hot things become cold, and so on, the transmutation always being between things of the same kind of different degrees. Take the case of a fearful man. By raising his mental vibrations along the line of fear-courage, he can be filled with the highest degree of courage and fearlessness, and likewise the slothful man may change himself into an active, energetic individual simply by polarizing along the lines of the desired quality. The student who is familiar with the processes by which the various schools of mental science, etc., produce changes in the mental states of those following their teachings, may not readily understand the principle underlying many of these changes. When, however, the principle of polarity is once grasped, and it is seen that the mental changes are occasioned by a change of polarity, a sliding along the same scale, the matter is more readily understood. The change is not in the nature of a transmutation of one thing into another thing entirely different, but is merely a change of degree in the same things, a vastly important difference. For instance, borrowing an analogy from the physical plane, it is impossible to change heat into sharpness, loudness, highness, etc., but heat may be readily transmuted into cold, simply by lowering the vibrations. In the same way hate and love are mutually transmutable, so are fear and courage. But fear cannot be transformed into love, nor can courage be transmuted into hate. The mental states belong to innumerable classes, each class of which has its opposite poles, along which transmutation is possible. The student will readily recognize that in the mental states, as well as the phenomena of the physical plane, the two poles may be classified as positive and negative respectively. Thus love is positive to hate, courage to fear, activity to non-activity, etc., etc. And it will also be noticed that even to those unfamiliar with the principle of vibration, the positive pole seems to be of a higher degree than the negative, and readily dominates it. The tendency of nature is in the direction of the dominant activity of the positive pole. In addition to the changing of the poles of one's own mental state by the operation of the art of polarization, the phenomena of mental influence, in its manifold phases, shows us that the principle may be extended so as to embrace the phenomena of the influence of one mind over that of another, of which so much has been written and taught of late years. When it is understood that mental induction is possible, that is, that mental states may be produced by induction from others, then we can readily see how a certain rate of vibration, or polarization of a certain mental state, may be communicated to another person, and his polarity in that class of mental states thus changed. It is along this principle that results of many of the mental treatments are obtained. For instance, a person is blue, melancholy, full of fear. A mental scientist, bringing his own mind up to the desired vibration by his trained will, and thus obtaining the desired polarization in his own case, then produces a similar mental state in the other by induction, the result being that the vibrations are raised, and the person polarizes towards the positive end of the scale instead of toward the negative, and his fear and other negative emotions are transmuted to courage and similar positive mental states. A little study will show you that these mental changes are nearly all along the line of polarization, the change being one of degree rather than of kind. A knowledge of the existence of this great Hermetic principle will enable the student to better understand his own mental states and those of other people. He will see that these states are all matters of degree, and seeing thus, he will be able to raise or lower the vibration at will, to change his mental poles, and thus be master of his mental states, instead of being their servant and slave. And by his knowledge he will be able to aid his fellows intelligently, and by the appropriate methods change the polarity when the same is desirable. We advise all students to familiarize themselves with this principle of polarity, for a correct understanding of the same will throw light on many difficult subjects. End of chapter 10 of the Kybalion, by 3 initiates.